When I asked my daughter-in-law about the wedding, I wasn't expecting a confession. I was expecting a date. A simple, sweet answer, maybe about flowers or a dress. But instead, she looked me right in the eyes and said words that made my knees weak. That day, I learned that sometimes the people you welcome into your home, the ones you call family, can hold secrets darker than strangers ever could. It was early spring in Alberta, the kind of morning when the air feels cold but smells of thawing earth. I was in the kitchen, standing by the window, watching the sparrows fight over crumbs on the porch. My hands smelled faintly of coffee grounds and dish soap, a smell that's been part of my mornings for as long as I can remember. My son Adam had recently married a young woman named Harper. Pretty girl, polite, well-spoken, and, at first, she seemed to adore my son. I remember thinking how lucky he was. He'd had his share of heartbreaks, but when Harper came along, something softened in him. Their wedding had been small, just family, a few close friends, nothing grand. I'd worn a pale blue dress and cried through most of the ceremony. Watching my son say his vows, I thought, this is it. My boys finally found peace. But peace, I've learned, has a way of being temporary. Adam and Harper had been married only 6 months when things started feeling off. Nothing big at first, just small things, the kind you almost miss if you're not paying attention. When I'd visit, Harper's tone would shift around me. She'd be warm and cheerful when Adam was in the room, but once he left, her smile would fade, like someone switching off a light. One afternoon, I stopped by their house to drop off a box of my homemade pickles, Adam's favorite. Harper opened the door and looked almost startled to see me. Her hair was pulled into a loose bun, and she was wearing one of Adam's old sweatshirts. "Oh, hi, Mrs. Coleman," she said. Her voice was flat. "Adam's not home." "That's all right," I said, holding up the box. "Just wanted to drop these off. You can tell him I stopped by." She hesitated, just a flicker of something in her eyes, and then forced a smile. "Sure, thanks." Normally she'd invite me in, offer me coffee, chat about the weather or her new job, but that day she didn't. She just stood there, one hand gripping the door frame, the other tucked behind her back. I don't know why, but something about her posture unsettled me. When I drove home, I couldn't shake it off. That uneasy feeling that maybe, just maybe, there was something I didn't know. Still, I told myself not to meddle. Adam was happy. Or at least he seemed happy. For a few weeks, life went on like that. I busied myself with my part-time work at the local library, my church volunteering, and my garden. But every now and then, I'd get these small reminders that something wasn't right. Adam stopped calling as often. When I'd ask about Harper, he'd give short answers, distracted, distant. Once I mentioned maybe having them over for Sunday dinner. He hesitated before saying, "We'll see, Mom. She's been tired lately." "Tired," I repeated, watching his expression. "Everything okay?" "Yeah," he said quickly. "Of course." But his eyes said otherwise. The breaking point came a few weeks later, on a Thursday evening. Adam called me out of the blue, his voice tight. "Mom, Harper wants to talk to you about something. Could you come over tomorrow?" "Of course," I said, though my stomach twisted. "Everything all right?" He paused. "I think it's better if she tells you herself." That night I barely slept. I kept turning over in bed, trying to guess what this was about. Money trouble? A pregnancy? Maybe they were moving? By morning, my nerves were raw. I baked a pie, apple cinnamon, Harper's favorite, because I didn't know what else to do with my hands. When I arrived, the house felt different. The curtains were half drawn, and the smell of coffee hung heavy in the air. Adam met me at the door, looking pale. He kissed my cheek, but wouldn't meet my eyes. "She's in the kitchen," he murmured. Harper was sitting at the table, her phone face down beside a mug of untouched coffee. She looked up when I entered, calm, almost too calm. "Harper," I said softly, setting the pie on the counter. "Adam said you wanted to talk." She nodded slowly. "Yeah." Her voice was quiet. "There's something I need to tell you." I sat across from her, my hands folded tight in my lap. "I've been meaning to tell you for a while," she began. "But I didn't know how. It's about the wedding." I frowned. "The wedding?" "Yes." She took a deep breath. "There's something you don't know. Something Adam doesn't know either." Adam shifted beside me. "Harper, what are you talking about?" She looked at him, and for a long, terrible moment said nothing. Then she whispered, "The man who officiated our wedding wasn't actually ordained." The words hung in the air like smoke. I blinked. "What?" "He wasn't licensed," she said, her voice trembling now. "The marriage isn't legal." I felt my chest tighten. "What do you mean it's not legal? Are you saying—" "I'm saying," she interrupted, tears forming, "we're not actually married." Adam's chair scraped back violently as he stood. "What the hell, Harper?" She buried her face in her hands. "I didn't know until last week. My friend from college, she's getting married next month. She was using the same officiant. When she tried to file the paperwork, she found out he'd been disbarred for falsifying credentials." I sat there stunned. My ears buzzed with silence. "So," I said slowly, "you two aren't legally husband and wife." Harper nodded weakly. "Not on paper." Adam turned away, gripping the edge of the counter. "How could you not check that, Harper? How could you let this happen?" "I thought it was fine," she cried. "He came recommended. He even did the ceremony for my cousin last year." I didn't speak. My hands were shaking too much. All I could think was, after all the joy, all the tears, all the pride I'd felt watching them say those vows, it wasn't real. And that was when I realized something even more unsettling. The look on Harper's face wasn't just guilt. It was fear. Not fear of Adam, not fear of me, fear of something else entirely, something she wasn't saying. Adam stood frozen, his knuckles white around the countertop. The sound of the refrigerator humming filled the silence. I could hear the faint ticking of the clock above the stove, each second stretching longer than the last. "Harper," he said finally, his voice tight, "if this is true—" "Why didn't you tell me right away?" "I was scared," she whispered. "I didn't know how you'd react. I thought maybe we could fix it quietly, file for a civil license, and no one would ever have to know. But you let me go around thinking I had a wife," he said, his tone rising. "When legally, I am your wife, Adam," she interrupted, eyes glistening. Paper or not, I meant every word I said that day. I could see the pain on both their faces, young love caught between mistake and betrayal. But deep down, something about this didn't sit right with me. "Harper," I said slowly, "you said you found out last week. Why wait until now to tell Adam?" She blinked rapidly, her voice trembling. "Because there's more." My chest tightened again. "More?" She nodded. "The man who officiated our wedding wasn't just unlicensed. He was someone I used to know. Someone I used to date." The air went cold. Adam's head snapped toward her. "You what?" She swallowed hard. "Before I met you, Adam, I was in a relationship. It ended badly. I hadn't seen him in years. When my cousin recommended him to officiate, I didn't realize it was the same person. I only recognized him the day of the ceremony, but by then, it felt too late. I felt the room tilt. "You mean to tell me," I said, my voice barely above a whisper, "that your ex-boyfriend married you to my son, knowing he wasn't even ordained?" Harper's lips quivered. "He said he'd gotten ordained online, and I believed him." "I didn't think—" "Didn't think?" Adam barked. "Didn't think or didn't care?" Tears spilled down her cheeks. "I didn't know he wasn't licensed. I swear, I just didn't want to cause drama." "You were so happy." "Everyone was." Adam turned away, running a hand over his face. "I can't even process this." The silence that followed was thick enough to choke on. I could smell the faint cinnamon from the pie cooling beside us, such a normal, homely smell, yet everything around it felt poisoned. Finally, I said softly, "Harper, who is this man?" She hesitated, then whispered, "His name's Michael." Michael Dane. I froze, because I knew that name. Michael Dane had once been a youth volunteer at our church, years ago. I remembered him as charming but arrogant, the kind of man who smiled too easily. And I remembered how one of the young women had filed a complaint against him for inappropriate behavior. He'd left town shortly after. "Harper," I said carefully, "did you know about his past?" She shook her head quickly. "No, I didn't. I swear I didn't." Adam's voice broke. "This is insane. So not only are we not married, but the man who pretended to marry us is your ex-boyfriend? How is this even real?" He stormed out of the kitchen, slamming the door so hard the window rattled. Harper covered her face, sobbing quietly. I wanted to comfort her, but I couldn't move. My hands were cold. My heart colder, because something about the way she cried didn't feel like the whole truth. The next day, I went by Adam's place again, bringing over some groceries. He hadn't answered my calls all morning. When he opened the door, he looked hollow, dark circles under his eyes, jaw tight. "Where's Harper?" I asked gently. "She went to stay with a friend," he said flatly. "Said she needed space. And you?" He exhaled shakily. "I don't know, Mom. I don't know what's real anymore." We sat together in silence for a while. I brewed him tea, and he stared blankly out the window. "Adam," I said quietly, "I think you need to find out exactly what happened. Get the paperwork checked, confirm everything." He nodded numbly. "I already called the county clerk." "There's no record of a marriage license." I felt my throat tighten. "Then it's true." "Yeah," he said bitterly. "The wedding wasn't valid. The only thing real was how much I loved her." He turned his head toward me, his eyes wet. "Do you think she planned it, Mom? Do you think she knew?" I didn't answer right away, because deep down, I wasn't sure. But I was sure of one thing. There was still something Harper wasn't saying. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Michael Dane, about his smug smile and the way Harper's hands had trembled when she said his name. The next morning, I made a few calls. An old friend from church, Ellen, still worked with the local registry. I asked her if she could check if Michael Dane was on file anywhere as a registered officiant. An hour later, she called back. "May," she said, her voice uneasy. "That name, it's flagged." "Flagged?" "He was under investigation a few years back. Apparently he'd been running some sort of scam. Fake officiations, fake counseling sessions, charging couples under false credentials. There were even rumors he'd blackmailed one of them afterward." My stomach dropped. Blackmail. It all clicked then. Harper's fear. Her hesitation, her half-truths. I thanked Ellen, hung up, and just sat there, staring at the phone. If Michael had something on Harper, something she was too afraid to admit, then this wasn't just about a fake wedding. It was about control. And suddenly, I knew what I had to do. That evening, I drove to Harper's friend's apartment complex, the one I remembered her mentioning once during dinner. It was a chilly gray dusk, the kind where your breath hangs in the air. I spotted her car in the lot, the one with the little pink air freshener hanging from the mirror. When she opened the door, her eyes widened in surprise. "Mrs. Coleman?" "Harper," I said softly. "Can we talk?" She hesitated, then stepped aside. The apartment smelled faintly of lavender and something burnt. Maybe toast. We sat at her kitchen table, the same place I'd sat with her the day before. Only this time, I wasn't here for pleasantries. "Harper," I began, "I know about Michael." Her face went pale. What do you mean?" "I know he wasn't just an ex-boyfriend. I know he's been in trouble before. And I know there's a reason you're still scared." Her hands trembled. She looked down, then whispered, "He called me." "When?" "After the wedding. He said if I didn't send him money, he'd tell Adam everything. About us, about the officiation. He said he'd ruin me." My breath caught. "So that's why you stayed quiet." She nodded, tears spilling. "I didn't know what to do. I thought if I kept quiet and fixed the license later, it would all go away." But he kept calling, asking for more. I leaned forward. "How much did you send him?" $5,000, she whispered. "Everything from our savings." I felt my jaw tighten. "And Adam doesn't know?" She shook her head. "No, he'd never forgive me." I sat back, exhaling slowly. So this wasn't just a mistake. It was blackmail, and it was time someone stopped Michael Dane, once and for all. I remember driving home from Harper's that evening, with my hands gripping the steering wheel so tight my knuckles turned white. The road ahead blurred through my tears and the rain that had begun to fall, light at first, then harder, streaking across the windshield like trembling lines of glass. I wasn't angry anymore. Not exactly. I was heartsick, because underneath all the lies and mistakes, there were two young people, my son and his wife, trapped in something cruel and manipulative, and I couldn't just sit by and let that man, that predator, hold power over them. When I got home, I made myself a cup of chamomile tea, my old remedy when the heart gets heavy. The house was quiet except for the soft ticking of the clock. I sat by the window, the steam rising between my hands, and I thought about what to do next. The old me, the one before my husband passed, might have told Adam everything right away. But I'd learned the hard way that timing matters in family. Sometimes the truth, if given too fast, can destroy more than it heals. So I decided to start with Michael. The next morning I called Ellen again. I asked her if she could find an address for Michael Dane, something current. She hesitated, but eventually said she'd see what she could do. By afternoon, she called back. "May, I shouldn't be giving this out, but I know what kind of man he is. He's been renting a small office downtown, calls it a life path counseling center. Probably another front." My pulse quickened. "Thank you, Ellen." I jotted down the address on a napkin and sat there staring at it. There was something almost poetic about it, a counseling center. The same man who'd shattered people's trust, pretending to fix others' lives. I drove there the next day. The building was old brick, tucked between a pawnshop and a nail salon. A small sign hung in the window. Life Path Guidance, helping you heal, one step at a time. I parked across the street and sat for a few minutes, steadying my breathing. I wasn't sure what I'd say. I only knew that I wasn't leaving without answers. When I walked in, the air smelled faintly of lemon disinfectant and cheap cologne. The waiting room was empty except for a faded couch and a small desk. And behind it, there he was, Michael Dane, older now, maybe mid-40s. His hair was grayer, but that smug, rehearsed smile was the same. "Can I help you?" he asked, looking up. "You can start by telling me why you blackmailed my daughter-in-law," I said quietly. The smile faltered. "Just a little. I'm sorry, I think you've got the wrong—" "Don't," I said, stepping closer. "I know everything. You married my son and Harper under false credentials. You took their money, and now you're threatening her." He leaned back in his chair, eyes narrowing. "Ah, "You must be Mrs. Coleman." Hearing my name in his mouth made my skin crawl. "She told you, did she?" he said, chuckling softly. "Well, that's rich. The truth is, your sweet little daughter-in-law isn't as innocent as she pretends." My stomach twisted. "What do you mean?" He stood, walking around the desk, slow and deliberate. "She begged me not to tell Adam about us, about how things ended. Said she didn't want to ruin her new life, so I helped her keep that secret. And sure, maybe I asked for a little compensation. Call it emotional damages." "You call blackmail damages?" He shrugged. "Depends who's telling the story." I stared at him, this man who could twist truth into knots, wear deceit like a suit. "You're a cruel man," I said quietly. "And you've hurt enough people," he smirked. "And what exactly do you plan to do about it, Mrs. Coleman?" For a moment I didn't answer. I just looked at him. And then I reached into my bag and set my phone on his desk. Screen facing up, the red recording light blinking softly. His expression changed. I smiled, calm and steady. "I think this will do nicely." He stepped back. "You can't use that—" "Oh, I think I can," I said. "You see, Michael, blackmail is a serious crime, and impersonating a licensed officiant? That's fraud. I may not be young, but I know how to make a phone call." He opened his mouth, then closed it. For the first time, he looked uncertain. "I'll make you a deal," I continued. "You send back every dollar Harper gave you, today, or that recording goes straight to the police. And if you ever contact her again, you won't have to worry about a wedding license. You'll be signing prison papers instead." For a long time, he just stared at me. Then slowly, he walked back behind the desk, his hands shaking slightly as he sat down. "You don't know who you're messing with," he muttered. "Oh, I do," I said softly. "I've seen your kind my whole life. Men who mistake kindness for weakness." There was a long pause, then he opened a drawer, pulled out a checkbook, and began to write. When he slid the check across the desk, I didn't even look at it. I just turned off the recording, picked it up, and said, "You can keep your counseling. I'll pray you find a conscience instead." And then I walked out. I drove straight to Harper's. When she opened the door, her face was pale with worry. "What happened?" she asked. I handed her the check. She stared at it, confused. "How?" "Don't ask," I said gently. "Just promise me this, no more secrets. Tell Adam everything, all of it. Let him decide what to forgive." She nodded, tears spilling down her cheeks. "I will, I promise." I touched her arm. "You're young, Harper. You made mistakes. But if you want a real marriage, it has to start with truth." She swallowed hard. "Thank you, Mrs. Coleman, for everything." As I left, I saw her clutching that check like it was more than money, like it was a lifeline. That night, Adam called me. His voice was shaky but different, lighter somehow. "She told me, Mom," he said. "Everything. The blackmail, the money, the fake officiant. I don't even know what to think." "And how do you feel?" I asked. He was quiet for a long moment. Broken but relieved too. "Because at least now I know." I closed my eyes, letting that settle in. "Knowing is the first step to healing, sweetheart." He exhaled softly. "We're going to make it right." Legally this time, I smiled. Good. For the first time in weeks, I felt something ease inside me. Maybe they'd make it. Maybe not. But at least the lies were gone, replaced by something cleaner, truer. Sometimes that's all you can hope for. The following week, things in our family started to shift. Not quickly, but like ice melting after a long winter. Adam and Harper met with a legal officiant, this time properly registered through the county clerk. There was no church, no guests, no bouquet. Just the two of them standing under a plain wooden arch in a small office, their hands clasped together. I was there, sitting quietly in the corner. The air smelled faintly of lilies from the vase on the clerk's desk. Harper's eyes were red but steady. Adam's voice trembled when he said, "I do," but he said it anyway. When it was done, the clerk smiled and said softly, "Now it's official," and for the first time, I saw Adam exhale, as if he'd been holding his breath for months. Afterward, they came to my house for dinner. Just the three of us. I'd cooked roast chicken and mashed potatoes, and Harper brought a small lemon cake she'd baked herself. The meal wasn't fancy, but there was peace, tentative, fragile but real, still. Peace has a way of attracting whispers, because secrets, once revealed, have a habit of spreading even when you think you've buried them deep. It started with a phone call from the church secretary. "Marlene, May," she said, lowering her voice, "I heard something odd from one of the ladies' circles. They said Harper's officiant was caught faking credentials. Is that true?" My stomach tightened. "Where'd you hear that?" "Oh, you know how people talk," she said lightly, though there was curiosity tucked behind every word. Apparently someone saw the report in the Gazette. It mentioned a man named Michael Dane being investigated for fraud. I went still. "It's in the paper?" "Yes, dear. Front page of the community section. They said he'd been caught running a scam, officiating fake marriages for cash. Police arrested him yesterday." My heart skipped. "Arrested?" Marlene sighed. "Terrible business. But it said one of the couples had turned in evidence. A recorded confession even. They didn't name names, of course." I leaned against the wall, gripping the phone. I hadn't expected that part to go public, and yet, as I hung up, I felt a strange mix of dread and relief. The man had finally been caught. Justice, quiet, unglamorous, but justice nonetheless. By the end of that week, the whole town was buzzing. At the grocery store, I overheard two women in the produce aisle whispering about that fake wedding mess. One of them glanced at me and quickly looked away, realizing who I was. In small towns, gossip doesn't need gasoline. It runs on its own fumes. I decided early on that I wouldn't feed it. When people asked, I just said, "It was a misunderstanding that's been resolved." No more, no less. Dignity, I reminded myself, is sometimes the only armor we have left, but not everyone showed the same grace. At church the next Sunday, a woman named Judith, who'd always had a sharp tongue and sharper perfume, approached me after service. "Well, May," she said with a syrupy smile, "I hear your son's wedding wasn't exactly by the book. How embarrassing that must have been." I looked at her, calm and measured. "Embarrassing for who, Judith? The man who lied, or the family that survived it?" She blinked, thrown off, then forced a laugh. "Oh, I didn't mean—" "I know what you meant," I said softly. "And I forgive you anyway." Then I turned and walked away. Because there's a kind of strength that doesn't come from shouting. It comes from choosing silence where others would choose spite. That afternoon, Adam stopped by with Harper. They looked tired but lighter. Harper wore a soft gray sweater, and Adam had his arm loosely around her waist, a gesture I hadn't seen in months. He helped me set the table while Harper poured tea. The house smelled of cinnamon again, the scent I always associated with healing. "Mom," Adam said, breaking the quiet, "we saw the news about Michael." "Was that because of you?" I hesitated. "Let's just say—" The truth found its way out. Harper's eyes met mine. She didn't say anything, but I saw the gratitude there. Deep, quiet, raw. She reached across the table, her hand brushing mine. "You didn't have to do what you did. You could have turned your back on me," I smiled faintly. "Family isn't about who's right, Harper. It's about who stays when everything goes wrong." Her eyes welled up. I'll never forget that. Weeks passed. The town moved on, as small towns eventually do. New gossip replaced old, and the world kept spinning. But something in our family had shifted for good. Harper started volunteering at the local women's center, helping young mothers learn budgeting and job skills. She said she wanted to earn back the good. Adam found a quiet steadiness again. He talked more, smiled more, and every Sunday they'd come by for dinner, not out of obligation, but out of choice. Sometimes, as I'd watch them clear the table or laugh softly over some shared joke, I'd think back to that first conversation, the one where Harper's answer had knocked the air right out of me. It seemed like a lifetime ago, but in truth, it was that moment, that shock, that unraveling, that had forced us all to see who we really were and what love really meant. Because love, I've learned, isn't proven in the perfect wedding, the grand gestures, or the photographs that make it to Facebook. It's proven in the quiet after the storm, when two people still choose to stay. A few months later, Harper came to visit me alone. It was early evening, the sky soft with pink light. She brought a small box with her. "I wanted you to have this," she said, setting it on the table. Inside was a framed photo, their second wedding, the one at the county office. Just the three of us, smiling, genuine. "I never thought I'd get a second chance to do something right," she said. "Thank you for giving me that." I looked at her, the woman who'd once been a stranger and now felt like a daughter. "You gave yourself that chance," I said softly. "I just reminded you that you deserved it," she smiled, tears glinting in her eyes. "You're a good woman, Mae," I chuckled quietly. "Just an old woman with a stubborn heart," she laughed, a sound lighter than I'd ever heard from her before. As she left, the sun dipped low behind the maple trees, painting everything in gold. I stood by the door, watching her walk down the path toward her car, and for the first time in a long while I felt peace settle over me, gentle, earned, and quiet. A year passed before I realized how much had changed. It's funny, you don't notice healing while it's happening. It creeps in like sunlight through old curtains, soft, slow, but persistent. Adam and Harper had moved into a little house on the edge of town, a cozy white place with blue shutters and a porch swing. Every time I visited, I'd find Harper in the garden, her hands in the dirt, humming some tune I didn't recognize. She said the garden helped her think. Adam built her a small greenhouse that spring. He'd never been the handyman type, but he learned. There was something poetic about it, building something that grows after so much had been broken. They invited me over every Sunday for dinner now. No grand gestures, just warmth. Harper would set the table with mismatched plates. Adam would tease her about overcooking the pasta, and I'd sit back, sipping my tea, watching them bicker and laugh like old friends rediscovering each other. It wasn't perfect. There were moments when I caught a flicker of old pain in Adam's eyes, or a shadow of guilt in Harper's smile. But that's the truth about forgiveness. It's not a switch you flip. It's a path you walk, one small step at a time. And some days, all you can do is keep walking. One Sunday afternoon, I stayed behind to help Harper wash the dishes. The kitchen smelled of rosemary and lemon. She stood by the sink, sleeves rolled up, her hair falling in strands around her face. "Mae," she said softly, her voice almost drowned out by the running water. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course, dear. Did you ever think I didn't deserve him? After everything that happened?" I dried my hands on a towel, studying her face. "There were times I wanted to," I admitted. "Times I thought you'd hurt my boy beyond repair. But then I remembered something my own mother used to say. People are more than their worst mistake." She blinked, her lip trembling slightly. "The way I see it," I continued, "you made choices out of fear, not malice. And when faced with truth, you chose courage. That's what matters." She nodded slowly, eyes glassy. "You could have hated me." "I could have," I said gently. "But what would that have healed?" We stood there in silence for a moment, the sound of plates clinking softly. The window opened to a cool breeze carrying the scent of lilac. Then she said something I'll never forget. "Sometimes," she whispered, "I think God gave me Adam not to make me happy, but to make me better. I smiled. That's usually how he works. A few months later, the Women's Center held a small appreciation event. Harper had been volunteering there almost a year, helping organize donation drives and teach young mothers how to manage finances. She invited me to come. When I walked into that modest hall, decorated with paper flowers and cheap balloons, I didn't expect to feel as proud as I did. But seeing her there, standing tall, smiling, guiding a nervous teenage girl through some paperwork, it hit me how far she'd come. During the ceremony, the director handed her a certificate and said, "Sometimes, the people who've been hurt the most are the ones who understand healing best." Harper looked out at the small crowd, her eyes finding mine, and I saw tears gathering. Later, she hugged me tight and whispered, "Thank you for not giving up on me." I squeezed her hand. That's what family's for, and I meant it. Meanwhile, word around town shifted too. The gossip that once stung had faded into memory, replaced by nods of respect. Even Judith from church came around one Sunday with a basket of muffins and an awkward apology. "Well," she said, adjusting her hat, "I suppose we all spoke too soon." I smiled faintly. Better late than never. People started to see Harper differently, not as the girl with the scandal, but as the woman who'd faced it with grace. And that's the kind of reputation that lasts longer than rumors ever do. By autumn, things had settled into a new kind of normal. One crisp October evening, I had dinner with Adam and Harper on their porch. The leaves were turning gold, and the air smelled faintly of smoke from a nearby chimney. Adam poured me a cup of tea and said, "Mom, we've been thinking." "About what?" I asked, sipping. He exchanged a glance with Harper, then smiled. "We want to renew our vows next year. Properly this time. Not just at the courthouse," Harper added softly. "We want you to officiate." I froze, stunned. "Me?" she nodded. "You're the reason we made it. You're the one who reminded us what marriage really means. It only feels right." I felt tears prick my eyes. "I'm not a minister," Adam chuckled. "You don't need to be. We'll have the license signed already. We just want your words." I looked at the two of them, hands intertwined, eyes steady, and I realized that somehow, through all the chaos, something sacred had been born. Not a perfect marriage, but a real one. The day of that vow renewal came the next summer. It was small, just family and a few friends, in their backyard under the same maple tree where Adam had proposed years ago. The air was warm, the grass soft underfoot, and someone had strung fairy lights across the branches. Harper wore a simple white dress, barefoot, her hair loose around her shoulders. Adam looked nervous, just like he had the first time. When it was my turn to speak, I stepped forward with my little note card, though, truth be told, I hardly needed it. "Marriage," I began, "isn't about the day you say, 'I do.' It's about every day you say it again. After mistakes, after pain, after learning what forgiveness really costs. It's not perfect and it's not meant to be. But when love is honest, it doesn't need perfection. It just needs persistence." Harper's eyes glistened. Adam smiled through tears. When they kissed, the crowd clapped softly. And in that golden light, I swear I could almost feel my late husband beside me, proud, steady, and at peace. Afterward, Harper came over and hugged me. "We did it," she whispered. "Yes," I said, holding her close. "You did." Later that night, when everyone had gone and the lights twinkled quietly in the trees, I sat alone for a while, just listening to the crickets. The world felt still. I thought about how easily life can break, and how beautifully it can mend if you let it. Sometimes the most shocking answers we hear aren't meant to destroy us. They're meant to wake us up, to show us what's real, what's worth fighting for, and what love truly is. And as I drove home under the wide Alberta sky, the stars blinking like small promises, I whispered to myself, some stories begin with heartbreak, but the good ones always end in grace. When I look back on everything that happened, the lies, the fear, the blackmail, the heartbreak, I realize something I couldn't see then. Sometimes the storm doesn't come to destroy your life. It comes to clear your path. I thought asking my daughter-in-law about her wedding would be a simple, sweet conversation. But that question cracked open a truth none of us were ready for. And yet if I hadn't asked, if she hadn't answered, none of us would have grown the way we did. People like to say, time heals all wounds. But I've learned it's not time that heals, it's honesty. It's the courage to face what hurts, to tell the truth even when your voice shakes, to forgive even when your heart still remembers the pain. Harper taught me that. Adam did too. And maybe, in a small way, I taught them. We live in a world that loves to point fingers, to label people as heroes or villains. But life isn't that simple. Sometimes good people make bad choices. Sometimes love starts with lies but ends in truth. And sometimes the hardest question, the one that breaks your heart, is the one that finally sets you free. So if you've ever been betrayed, or been the one to do the betraying, I want you to remember this. Redemption isn't found in perfect endings. It's found in choosing to do better after the mistake. Because grace, real grace, doesn't erase the past. It transforms it. I still keep that picture Harper gave me on my kitchen shelf, the three of us smiling after their second wedding. When the light hits the frame in the morning, it glows just a little, like a quiet reminder that love doesn't need to be flawless to be faithful. And sometimes, when I make my coffee and look out the window at the sparrows fighting over crumbs, I think to myself, maybe that's what family really is. A group of imperfect people learning, again and again, how to love each other anyway. Would you have forgiven her? Tell me in the comments. And if this story touched your heart, don't forget to subscribe and share it with someone who still believes in second chances. Until next time. This is May reminding you, the truth may hurt, but it's what sets love free.